And Adams. She's wondering about the sale that happened on March 22nd of 157 acres. It's called North Mare Island, but it's pretty basically the eastern portion between Tennessee Street and Highway 37, and I'd say as you are and Mare Island Strait. And so it's a done deal unless if somebody comes up to stop it or something comes up to stop it, and it'll take up to 120 days to close escrow.
So, all right. Thank you for the question. And we're not going to be able to answer every single issue that you might have spinning through your head, right? We know that. But we had to start somewhere. And Joe's been out on the ground. He's been at the farmer's market. He does call people. He, as the chair of the Sierra Club Solano group, they hold regular meetings. He's been attending city council. Many of you have been attending city council over the last couple of years. So he's had his ear to the ground, as they say, regarding what people are worried about, or talking about, or asking about Mare Island. Well, as you know, April 14th, you don't know this, 1994, so 28 years ago last Thursday, Paula Tagelski, raise your hand, and I attended the first meeting in this room of the Restoration Advisory Board for Mare Island Naval Shipyard, and we still serve. Paula is a Benicia High School chemistry teacher, now retired. So one thing that we learned quite early on was that we had a huge project, right? And we also were always encouraged by the state regulator, and I remember him saying it 1,000 times, Chip Gribble. Don't let anybody, ridicule you or say, well, why are you doing, what's with this environmental cleanup? It's in the way, it's making it so that we can't do what we want to do on the old base. And he said, it's simple. Environmental cleanup makes reuse possible. So here we are at $1 billion over that 28 years. Much of it the Navy spent even before they closed the base. And it's come out of several programs, and so that's the number that we've come up with as kind of a rough, even though you might see different numbers out there or hear different numbers. Recently, the developer representative told a Rotary Club that Gordon invited me to that there was just $200 million spent on the environmental cleanup. Well, that was just one section of the item. So I'm not here to talk about that tonight, or we aren't. What we really wanted to do is keep the phone on here, or the computer on. We wanted to specifically help answer a question that keeps coming up. People keep saying it feels like, whether you're a resident, and by the way, Joe, Dan serve on the Restoration Advisory Board, whether you're a resident or whether you live in town, whether you've attended some council meetings or not, people are asking, isn't there something that's kind of changed in the last couple of years at Mare Island? And how am I going to advance this? Is anybody smarter than me? Have you got an arrow? Return? No, I don't have a mouse. No, an arrow. An arrow? Yeah, there's all kinds of arrows.
Try them all.
Try them all. Yeah, it's just blinking.
Right.
Well, pretty soon we're just going to have to talk it through. Is it open in the PowerPoint? Is it PowerPoint? Oh, what about? No, maybe it's not a touch. How about that? Is that
Russell can help.
Russell, you?
Yeah, I'll volunteer staff.
Volunteer staff. I like it. Oh, there. No. There. Oh, wait a minute. Wow, that's kind of weird. You could do it that way. Okay. So there. We already know what what we're up to. Okay. So what has happened to this is going to be the specific question. The community-run facilities and programs on Mare Island. These were really the backbone the development, this organic development that took place on the island, beginning with even the Mare Island Historic Park Foundation. We have a board member from there today, past staffer. Long before the, let's keep on going, because I think you get the agenda. We're going to try to quickly go over what some of those losses are, those changes that you're experiencing, and maybe kind of like my brain injury, you know, like what is it that's missing? Why can't I quite piece it together? Why isn't this place open? I thought they used to have a museum. Wait a minute, didn't they have a sports center? So we're going to try to do a quick update on that and then spend the majority of the day, the rest of the time, talking about the some strategy. You know, we have a little wake-up call here, but what would we do if we had the perfect world? Oh, this is fun. You're in the audience. That's Veronica Vero with her mother at the preserve at a Mother's Day tea. Okay, so in that time period, the base closed the April 1st, 96. Wasn't open to the public, if you didn't know this, till October of 2004. They were kind of fixing it up or doing something or being afraid, shaking in their boots. And then that 150th anniversary of the shipyard came along and ba-boom, it was open. There went my comment. But so from that time on, we had primarily community-run, community-based organizations, like the Mare Island Historic Park Foundation, founded for one purpose: to manage the 4,000 artifacts that the city of Vallejo was going to be receiving from the Navy, create a museum, operate the chapel, and had taken that job on, create an educational program, tours, events at the commander's house and another property. Be self-sustaining, try to keep things running. And this is receiving buildings just as they were, and boxes and thousands of, actually 8 to 10 semi-trucks is what 4,000 artifacts looks like. They were the forerunners. They were out there in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they were doing bus tours, and even before the base was open, you could schedule an appointment, and they were founding their museum. A lot of people want to know, well, wait a minute, what happened to the preserve that I used to go to? Yeah, it's open, but, well, it just looks like a jogging trail. Where did that come from? How did it get downgraded? These are all good questions. The museum, by the way, I keep going, is closed now. Was it just COVID? A lot of people want to know that. How did it come to be closed? Mare Island Preserve was established, it established kind of accidentally a wildlands community. And now that's been lost. It's just been just a jogging trail now. And it was important because, like the museum, protected historic resources, built a vast library, protected the chapel, made sure the chapel was available for public use. The Mare Island Preserve protected, the Mare Island Heritage Trust, the Mare Island Preserve protected natural and cultural historic resources and scenic vistas. There was substantial investment made by these nonprofit organizations, millions of dollars in the case of the museum. They paid a community facilities district fee from the founding of that structure. The Mare Island Heritage Trust carried insurance the entire time, liability insurance, protected the city and ourselves. We then brought on camping and a lot of other ways to make money to be self-supporting, like the museum did with its events that it held at the commander's house and the chapel and within the museum. Next, but now we have this very constricted. use of the preserve, and we're no longer managing it or its natural and historic resources. In the meantime, when we were removed from the management of the property, then look what happened. We felt like it was on our watch, but we had no control over 500 trees being cut down in the preserve. And motorcyclists are kind of tearing up the preserve right now. I think some of you were even on a walking tour at the Flyway Festival where a motorcycle came right through the 30 or 40 people. Kind of weird, but no signage that tells you it's a problem. There's no ADA access now to the preserve, actually, after it existed for 14 years. So the next one. Just things have changed dramatically. We had camping that we introduced in 2005. It was part of our draft agreement. The staff understood at that time that we needed a revenue source. It was a very strong revenue source, and it was also part of the task force report that we had submitted to the mayor and council. It was a solid source of funding. And continue next. We have had, tens of thousands of people that have come through the preserve. I don't know if there's a number on the museum and the chapel, but easily tens of thousands of people. I'm focusing on those two organizations, but here we come next to an agency that's in charge in Vallejo. If you don't know, the Greater Vallejo Recreation District is who manages most community recreation and parks in Vallejo, except for the preserve. And they had a very big, successful sports center that was there for many years. They took it over probably about 15 years ago. Thousands, again, of players came through from throughout the region. Little kids started out in this community growing up playing sports in that facility. It had a huge infusion of capital by the former developer. That's closed. It's a total loss with no compensation. That's what's crazy about all these closures of all of these facilities. There's no compensation plan, there's no reparation, there's no alternative facilities being offered or proposed. It's just an odd situation. And the recreation district, by the way, was making $30,000 a month cash off of that facility, which is pretty amazing when you consider how strapped agencies can be, like the city, that have just a tax base only. That was very entrepreneurial of them. And similar to what they do by renting out all their facilities, we had a similar model. We had weddings, and the chapel had weddings, and so we just, that's how you make a living when you're a community-based or an agency organization. You think of creative ways to generate revenue, but also serve the public in a way that your city can't really do. And that's what our task force report recommended to the council and mayor at that time on the preserve was this. We looked all over the country, and we worked on it for 4 years. And in the end, we learned that Fort Mason was a great model, Skyline Wilderness Park in Napa's a great model. These were places that weren't depending on the city or on the county for anything. Remember, Solano County doesn't have a national park. We have one small state park in Benicia. We don't have an open space and recreation district. So we really, truly, to go out to Mare Island and pioneer developing programming and facilities, you had to create nonprofits, which we both did, the museum and us. And they had a long-term exclusive partnership with the city of Vallejo to operate again, to showcase the Navy artifacts. That was all closed abruptly. And what kind of is most concerning to the public, I think, is no plan's been brought forward or any offer of assistance from either the city or the developer. The city just said, well, we know you had 10, 11 years still on your lease next, but now you don't. So where did these policy decisions come from? Or are they policy decisions? Or should they be policy decisions and come before the council? You might know that the developer, and I'm trying not to just single out, you know, there are only really two big parties on the island, actually three. The current developer and the State Lands Commission, and then the city of Vallejo manages all state lands, granted land. The Navy still has 1,200 acres in its holdings. But the first thing that happened in June of 19, where we started to get the shift, something different was going on, was the developer bought the golf course and immediately closed it. So that's almost 3 years ago. Keep going. And they've made clear in public presentations that they are not going to bring a golf course back online at that property. And they are definitely making a lot of noise about the fact that they will want to put housing on. And I'm not quite sure how housing is always the immediate translation from an open space in a community. In America, it just jumps without almost any thought. It immediately goes to, well, if we don't have a golf course, then we have housing. You know, but maybe there's some other open space that would be appropriate there. Here again, this is a photo of the commander's house that I just took a couple nights ago. Quarters A and B, we've already brought that up, were managed for decades by the Mare Island Historic Park Foundation, and this building's closed. Almost all simultaneously, all our properties were closed by the city / developer, depending on who owned the property and who regulated it, overnight. And they were all using public safety structural, even though we had a clear structural report by the city at the preserve buildings, by the city's retained structural engineer just about 2 years before this. So it was amazing how a bomb storage magazine could suddenly become deficient. We don't know how that works. Okay, next. Yeah, that's dog fur on my... another thing that you may not remember, but a lot of people might. The Vallejo Rugby Club. John Kelly, kind of famous in the region, a rugby player at Cal. He brought together the rugby club. They used Morton Field. I went up and took this photo this morning. On a Sunday morning, Morton Field is completely silent. There's not even geese on it. It's being mowed, it's being watered, and fussed with in a minimal way, but nothing's there. It's dead, it's gone, it's silent. And these guys were kicked off because they got behind on their water bill. Well, why did they have to pay the water for the entire field? They were mowing it, they were doing repairs, they were painting. What more could you ask our local nonprofits to do? I don't know if you know this, but in Solano County, $3 per capita is given from philanthropic organizations. In San Francisco, $1,200 per capita. We are really strapped, and when we say, and we give you our word that we're going to go make something really cool for you, it's out of sweat, it's out of love, and it is always, none of us have ever fallen down on our insurance or our board minutes or whatever, but it is a gift to this community. So what happened to all those gifts? Next. What about that dog park at the north end of Mare Island? Who got to bring their dog there? You don't remember it? It was in a former Navy baseball field. And again, someone went to the city manager at the time and he said, give us insurance and make sure to mow it and clean up the dog poop and you're on. Bought a porta potty in. And overnight, one day the city public works department, I'm trying not to ding them, just went off and suddenly the fencing was all gone. It's in a big pile over in the part of Mare Island courtyard. And the dog park was gone. We had no idea why. Next. What about when the new developer said, tell you what, we're just going to make the North Island pristine and perfect with barbed wire fence. They did. They put a big investment in. I don't know what that number is, but it's big. And the city staff went out and helped clean up. We didn't have this dumping problem for the first 20 years that we were out there, because there were people there. When good people are present, bad people tend to shy away. But with that barbed wire fence went all access for good people, so now only bad people are there. So we no longer have access to fishing. That's our public right. That's our land. The waters adjacent to the river and in the river are public trust lands of the people of the state of California. We cannot be blocked, prevented from getting to our waterways. Will we have to wait 30 years, as the developer says it will take, before things really get jump-started on Mare Island? In the meantime, how do we reach our river? Funny one that you probably really don't know about. We had a model airplane park. You can see it. I took that photo this morning, the barbed wire, so you can't get on. There's no plans to reopen or provide anything for that. Do you remember that use? That group was organized. They carried insurance, and they had an agreement with the city, and they maintained the site. One of the things I'm asking, we're asking, people are asking, is why can't we continue to use our own lands? Why are they being sold and fenced? How long will we wait? We heard again in a public meeting that it will be 7 to 9 years before the documentation is in place to then jumpstart the 30 years out development. What do we do in between? We were a niche in between when the Navy left and when things started rolling on Mare Island. We fit in nicely. We all fit in beautifully. And there were a lot of other organizations working. This one's an example. Here we have a building through which the mainland learned of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Some people say, and you can probably correct me, that there's a possibility that Amelia Earhart's distress calls came in on a separate radio that wasn't being used by the Navy but was still kind of in the radio room. It's a streamlined, modern building built in 1940. It was supposed to be listed on the National Register, but as the base closed, it just turned 50. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service, National Wildlife Refuge, and we put a proposal together to the Navy, to the city. It was adopted, accepted, to take on the responsibility for the northern edge of Mare Island, where the Fish and Wildlife Service already has part of the San Pablo Bay National Wildlife Refuge on Mare Island. And what we would do was we would go fundraise the federal money for the match that would convert this building to a regional environmental education center like the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge has in Fremont. Something that we estimated 2.5 million people between, say, Brentwood, Oakley, Antioch, all the way around to Petaluma and San Rafael don't have access to. Today, they still don't have access to that. But in 7 years, I traveled to DC. People in this room understand this stuff because you do this kind of thing. It's cuckoo. But I got on the plane with my brother's American standby, family standby, and I flew 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 into National. And I walked the halls of Congress and walked and walked and walked and walked. And one day, we got our lucky chance. And in 1999, we got into the federal budget for the Department of Interior, 00 through 03, to restore this building and to convert it to a regional environmental education center and the headquarters for the National Wildlife Refuge. There's a photo I took last night. This is under the city's maintenance agreement with the U.S. Navy prior to the transfer of the property.
Where is that?
It's on the northwest corner of the island. But I'm saying that the building is still structurally sound, but when I asked 3 or 4 years ago when USGS was moving out of the building, I asked the mayor at the time and staff, could we take a look at it? Could we begin to fundraise for it, bring on state and federal money again? I was told no. And this is what it looks like today. Thank you very much. Next. And these are just missed opportunities. You know, this is what we feel that we are missing out on that the rest of the Bay Area takes for granted. And how do we jumpstart this? How do we make this shift? How do we make this shift? We have long-term partners, Pollen Ranch, and they do wildcraft collecting, harvesting of fennel pollen, a very esoteric job. But they also collect pollen through, for distribution around the world in agricultural setting. As bees are dying, they are harvesting the pollen and applying it with sprayers. So in this case, this is collected specifically for culinary purposes. I have some over there for you to sample if you like. And this year, after more than a decade of just cutting weeds, flowers off of weeds on Mare Island, they're banished from Mare Island. And that revenue that we would have gotten, and of course they as a company would have gotten, but they understand their corporate responsibility and they were generous with giving us donations, was cut off. And it was because the staff said the Navy did not do an adequate job of environmental cleanup, and so this company could no longer deploy at Mare Island, even though it does in 9 other counties and does with our sanitation district. The same fennel growing in the same soil. Yes. These are odd things. And then you asked about the North Mare Island sale. We're not going to get a whole lot into that, into the weeds, as people might say. But we might ask, how did the plan shift so radically from what the original intent of the development agreement was at the North Island? How did they shift so radically? What will we stand to lose? And you've seen some of the things we are losing or have lost right now. And what's the benefit for us? I mean, they put some barbed wire up and they have some security guards going around harassing you on public streets. Does that constitute what we as a community feel is the highest and best use of that property? Is sitting on it, just watching someone sit on it, the best use, or is there a way to make some kind of a relationship that could work better for all of us? Just want to point out, and then you can move to the next, that the film company on Mare Island was a part of the original proposal by that developer, and now the film company is as long gone as the museum or the Mare Island Heritage Trust. They are out of here, and that's sad. And I want to also say that North Mare Island was community run and invested in. You could tell from all the things that I've listed. This was a coastal cleanup day. I was the captain for it. I always had over 400 participants. Don't get anybody started thinking that all the city does, the citizens do, is poop and you clean it up. That's not so. We went out there and picked up, year after year, tons and tons of garbage, just like city staff. But in that case, we were invested in it as community-based organizations. And so, how do our desires get ensured? Not just through planning documents and environmental documents, but how else do we plug in to this new world order that we have? And there were huge community volunteer and business investments. We had so many businesses that came and helped us clean up the garbage or helped us trim trees so that we could have the Flyway Festival. We had the Flyway Festival in the commissary, or the newest building on Mare Island, built in 1989, for about 7 years. And we had lots of company support for that, tidying and getting painting and all kinds of neat things. And now that building's been torn down by the city. And so what we're really going to do for the next is kind of, well, and there's one last thing I want to talk about, reparation. I mentioned it earlier. Reimbursement. You're a business. One day your business is seized. Where are your assets? How do you justify your assets over time? How do you tell the IRS what happened to you? How do you tell the public what happened to you when you went from, as we did one year, $150,000 income as a nonprofit to minus 6,500. Luckily, we had something in the bank account. That's what our IRS records say. Where did that investment go? Where are our resources right now? Where's the museum's resources right now? Where are they? There's a key and a padlock and a K-rail. That's not an effective way to deal with local businesses. And we are California, all nonprofits who operate in California have a California Secretary of State business entity license. If we're a nonprofit, we have an IRS tax deductible, proof of tax deductible status. We operate as businesses in California. We operate as businesses in Vallejo. We contribute in the economic multipliers. When you came to live on Mare Island, or you bought a house in Vallejo, or what kept you here? What are the amenities that you started experiencing from day one, the minute that island was open? It became your playground, became your campground for 4 years. It became the place you took friends and family. A woman just called me on the phone. She said, your phone number's on the internet, and I want to know if I can bring this family from Germany to the preserve. What are the hours? And I said, yeah, sure, and sign our petition. So when 10,000 people, just 300 short of 10,000 people sign a petition, and you might be told, well, they don't live in Vallejo, or they don't live in my district, so it doesn't matter. It does, because the preserve is owned by the state of California. Did you know that? It's for the enjoyment of all Californians. So if that petition is signed by a Californian, it counts. And we're close to 10,000 online and another 1,000 on paper. What do we do with that petition? That petition is directly to the decision makers at the council and mayoral level. But do we use it as leverage? Can it work for us? How do we really are wrestling with this. These are astonishing losses that our organizations, our businesses have experienced, not because of COVID. We couldn't apply for COVID money. It was directly because we were taken out overnight in a period of just about 3 months' time by city staff and public safety department specifically. So what we'd like to think about is to look at alternatives for restoration of those programs and facilities. It's been a massive disinvestment, and it can't be sustained because there will be political and community, both regional and local backlash. You can't just keep hiding this fact, and that's one of the reasons why Joe kept bugging me about we really have to have a public meeting. We really have to start talking about how is this going to be different? How can we make it different? Next. And so that's where we are right now. Let's spend the rest of the time, some people said to us, well, we don't want just a bunch of bitch session, do you? And that's kind of a bad word to say in public, but, a complaint session. Well, no, but we do want to hear from you for a little bit. What matters most to you about Mare Island now and the future was something that I thought of, and then how have you been affected by the changes that we're experiencing? And then go to the next one. And then here's some strategy thoughts. So, Joe, do you want to go from there?
Excuse me, Russell. Move your chair and get this out. I'd like to open it up to everybody. Thank you so much, Myrna, by the way. Everybody give Myrna an I think you did an excellent job. I'd like to open it up, but I'd like people to try and come forward. I saw Paula has her hand raised, so stay there.
See if you can take it.
Yeah, I'm going to take it as far as I can, which is about that far. Come forward a little.
By the way, there's that fennel that's now banned product. No, it's not really.
I was going to ask, did the city give you any reason for shutting any of these things down?
Excellent question.
But they've public safety, structural. This previous city manager just said the preserve should be a jogging trail, not a wildlands community, which is what we call it. He might have called it something different, but just downgraded to, you know, something that wasn't connected to the community. His fire chief 4 days on the job said, these are all clues. Rich people are buying, things are going to change around here. Rich people are buying this island. They don't like the way you run this park. And I don't know what the specifics, the Greater Vallejo Recreation District, the developer had put over $200,000 into refurbishing the building, and then almost immediately when the developers, a structural engineer came in, they said the whole building was going to fall down around them. I mean, it's pretty much under the category of, quote, public safety, but yet the reports don't jive with the previous permits and reports. So it's a little bit odd, but they're also private, so we don't really know what they say. They're private documents, so we don't know.
Okay, Robert.
Thank you, Myrna. Thank you, Joe, and all of your volunteers for an enormous amount of suffering and striving and the labor of love you guys have put in over many years. There are no words to express that. People who have walked through, seen, and enjoyed the preserve know it and feel it. And my specific question is, we all know that the council gives instructions to the city manager and the city attorney to make things happen with all the legal pros and cons. So knowing that, when I keep hearing the city, blah, 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 the city, when you keep referring that, I feel we all can directly ask who exactly in the city, as in the council members, could or could not control somebody in the public works or somebody in another department who could cause so much of questionable harm. So I have a lot of very conflicting information that I experience when I hear some of the presentation in a good way, but we are not holding them accountable. Are these 7 council members always letting these rogue employees or managers get away with murder, get away with all this? Is one of the questions I want to ask you. Thank you.
Well,
yeah. We can't find out.
the concept is you got a city council that directs staff to do things. It's not a perfect system by any means. Staff tends to get full of themselves and do what they feel. A great example is the preserve, because in late 2018 there was a 7-0 vote to bring up the visitor center up to code and spend $70,000 in emergency fund. And then all of a sudden a new city manager comes in, and instead of that occurring,
Oh no, that's actually the year later. It's 19. There's 150,000.
well, the vote
Before
was in
the-
2018, wasn't
No, it's in 19. But anyway.
it? Anyway, so but anyway, a new city manager comes in and the story completely changes.
Oh, it's in 18. Yes.
Yeah,
When he
yeah.
comes. Yes.
And so, in a city manager-dominated system like we have, the city manager makes a lot of decisions. And unless a council has a majority that's willing to call them on the carpet and say, this is not what we like, which is a very difficult decision for a council to make. Because then you have happened like what happened to this last city manager. He just feels he doesn't have a majority and he hits the road and you have a hard time replacing him. So it becomes a very weird game. But I think it's one that if we get out and we get a majority that we, of folks elected that we can trust, we'll get a better outcome.
Another question back there.
Yes. Charlie. Charlie, can you come up here so I don't have to repeat it?
Oh, don't make me get up.
Well, speak very loudly, then.
Talk loud. The question is a simple one. In that scenario that you just painted beautifully, and I don't know if this is conspiracy theory or rumors, but what we've heard for years is that four of the council members...
Louder.
Four of the council members, in fact, have been bought by certain representatives in the community. Is that true? And why would we even consider going through this process of actual dialogue about these decisions for the future of this community if they already know the way they're going to vote? Is that, I mean, I don't mean to be provocative, but if that's the reality.
It's a legitimate question.
That's the whole
So the
purpose
question
of it.
is a majority on our council bought by a special interest?
And again, I did not use the word majority. I have heard over and over and over again that there are four members of the council that were paid for.
Well,
That's the majority.
turns out.
So anyway,
But I'm saying specifically.
I don't think it actually works that way, to be frank. Do I think that that special interest gets on the phone and texts them how to vote every council meeting? It could be. It could be with some of them that happens. I think it's much more likely that when you're given a 2,800-page report, a packet before a city council meeting like the one on March 22nd, and you have 72 hours, you got 3 days to read that, and then make your a very qualified decision. A lot of the information in there you're not even familiar with. I think that there's a certain amount of finger on the scale type stuff. And a lot of that finger on the scale comes from staff. You say, well, I don't have time to read all this. Let me call up so-and-so who's project manager on this deal, or so-and-so who's on that deal, and let them tell me what the way I should do it. And I know that the two council people here, I have great confidence that they actually read that damn packet and actually make an independent decision. But do I think that of all the council people? No. Yes.
No more. Let's just let,
Right.
no, Charlie,
Okay.
we really don't have a lot of time today.
Yes.
We can follow up privately.
You stand up? All right, I'm just kind of scratching it.
Myrna, I think what you've done and what these nonprofits have done have been just commendable, and sweat equity and volunteers is a great thing.
Closer to the mic, please.
Closer to the mic.
Yeah, perfect.
I just commended Myrna.
Yeah.
So, and
Former planning commissioner and former economic development director Kathleen Diop.
yeah, and 30 years in base closure work.
Yep.
So, and what needs to be done in Mare Island is beyond the capabilities of not just nonprofits, of the city of Vallejo.
So what's the solution?
Well, Concord, part of it's going to East Bay Regional Park District. Presidio, you may all not know that John Garamendi, who might be our congressman, was one of the founding board members of Presidio Trust.
But that's not where we are today.
It's not where we are today, but it doesn't mean it isn't where we are. So
We've been working on that for some
Okay,
30
I'll stop.
years. Yeah.
I mean, Myrna,
she worked for the Presidio Trust. She knows how effective
what I'm saying,
alternatives
all I'm
work.
trying to say is
We can't do it.
nonprofits can do a lot, community efforts can do a huge amount. And the scale of investment needed in Mare Island can't be, if the only pocket to turn to is the private developer, that drives something. If we can turn to state and federal pockets, if we can turn to National Park Service. Now, I don't know the right solution to this. And this is what I said at midnight when y'all were approving the Nimitz deal. And if we all look like we're shooting each other and angry all the time, why is the state of California going to get involved? Why is the federal going to get involved?
Well, I would
We
hope-
need to all go, because at this point, we all need to go together and work with the private sector and the community and all to get OPM, that's what I learned in business school, other people's money, into realizing these objectives. And that's just my take, and I wasn't going to say anything, but
Yeah.
I don't think you all are doing the wrong thing, and community support is
Well, thank you, Kathleen. Before you go, I want to make one really, really critical point. and that Solano County does not have a park district.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's a huge limitation for us. So, now, go ahead, Brenda.
Well, I just want to point out, Kathleen was actually an early negotiator with us on one of our draft agreements, and we made a lot of progress on that together. I believe that something that I mentioned to the mayor recently was a state regulator who regulated Mare Island for 16 years. He called me and he said, the state and federal environmental cleanup laws are so incredible. CERCLA, he sees, Daniel, as this eloquent and beautiful law that has one preamble missing, the word trust. And what we were able to accomplish in these years up until a couple of years ago was fundamentally trust between staff and the community. They recognized who the leaders were. They recognized who they were underpinned by, every one of the members of the public. They took a cue when 10,000 signatures were signed, or in the liquefied natural gas tanker terminal, 11,000 signatures were signed. And that sent a wake-up call to Shell, Bechtel, and the city of Vallejo, and they abandoned the project. But there is this little bit of a reticence to engage with the community now, and that's where I feel this backlash could come from. And of course, we've turned over every possible stone, given the tools that we have had, but state money doesn't flow so easily now, neither does federal money, because as Kathleen said, there is a mechanism, a pathway for that, and we have closed those doors in a way as a community, and now we're looking at that one golden egg and one 850-acre landowner, and in the past our developers were willing to give pretty good sums of money. We received $5,000 a year for many years from Lennar to put on the Flyway Festival. We get $500 now. From the new developer. And I'm not naming names, I'm just saying this is part of the strategy, that Kathleen is talking about. Decisions were made not to bring national parks. Now, how would we get them here if we wanted to? So just a follow-up on that, I think.
Well, all I'm trying to say is clearly the model of fully privatizing Mare Island didn't work.
Yeah.
And with private nonprofits and privatized cleanup and all the things.
Well, the cleanup isn't privatized. That's the Navy's always on the hook for that 100%.
Weston was privatized.
No, that's not a privatized source of funding.
That was contract.
The mayor appointed 35 people. Can you imagine doing that today? That's how much trust we had. After the liquefied natural gas tanker terminal debacle, 35 members of the public from all over Northern California came and sat down for 4 years together and developed a management tool for the Mare Island Preserve. That's unheard of. How would we bring something like that back to the table if that was a way that we might want to go forward? I don't want to put you guys to sleep by just talking to myself, but I do want to say that we look to them for strategies from around the country, and our report shows partnership, 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 partnership. The reason the Mare Island Museum created a nonprofit and had a partnership with the city of Vallejo with a 33-year lease to manage significant resources for the city, the reason we founded as a nonprofit was specifically because we saw the opportunities for partnering with the agency as well as with many other state and other federal agencies, and bringing proposals to private fund money sources like Joe and I did the other on Wednesday. We brought a private proposal to a private funding source, but we would have to clean up these problems that are right now staring us in the face before that money would flow, because of what Kathleen said. Everyone wants to shy away. GVRD applied for 5 or 6 Prop 68 funds, and they lost every grant application. How could
Yes,
that be?
Beverly.
Yeah, I had 2 points. One is, I think that what Kathleen
But we have to hear louder from you.
Yeah.
One of the points about Kathleen, I think that goes into the strategies section, and we need to really include that as maybe even number one. But my point that I wanted to make was, over the years, I used to have different friends come from out of town. We'd go to the visitor center, and I'd meet people that had donated all these wonderful things. Somebody gave an entire group of china, and just over the years. And I'm wondering, whatever happened to all those things? You know, there was just all sorts of things that people had collected, and antiques from Mare Island, you know, thousands of dollars worth of things at the visitor center. So what happened to all that stuff?
I believe all the stuff is still locked up in the visitor center. And as we were out there earlier today, they made sure and put big cement blocks, what do you call those things?
K-rail.
K-rails, out in front of the doors to make sure that nobody would get in there.
I just want to point out that when nonprofits receive a donation, the individual giving the donation says, I don't want this junk. You can sell it, you can throw it away, if you can use it, use it. Or I found all these linens when I bought a storage unit, and I thought of you. All the way to, you can never own this. This is mine. My dad made this ruler at Mare Island for me. He carried this lunch pail for 3 generations, and I want it back one day, but I'm going to let you display it. There's a wide range of things that nonprofits who have collections are responsible for. And so we won't take a lot of time today, but I know the museum is, their artifacts are safe and sound, and if they were given something that someone didn't care if they sold, then they may have taken that opportunity to sell it in the tag sale or something like that. You know, like people do with white elephant sales to fundraise for the nonprofit.
Okay, well, now it looks like we're going back around. So Paula,
Well, let's
again.
not make more questions, too. Let's wrap up the questions and go to strategy for the last
Half hour?
half
What do we
hour.
got? Okay, real fast, Paula.
Do you think it would help to circulate a petition in the community and get signatures that, yes, we want the nonprofits back?
Well, we have one. And I think first we're going to finish trying to get to the 10,000 for Myrna. But I do not think that that would be a bad strategy at all, Paula. I think that's a great idea. Yes, sir, Rob.
A quick question. What, if any, I'm just thinking the flip side, the current developer and you, what, if any, efforts have been made, and what is the response to work with you on it to make it a win-win for both? Thank you.
Well, I have to say that after my being involved with this since the day that we won the cement factory fight, and I think you all should remember and give yourself a round of applause for winning that fight, because that was us that won it. Since that day, I've gotten invited to lunch once with the developer. So,
That's better than me. Okay, I think that this next half hour, if we could switch from questions to what Kathleen already got us thinking about, Paula already got us thinking about, and sincerely, now that you see the lay of the land, now that you might have some updates, you're probably still going to have some questions. Things are still going to be confusing, but what's in your heart right now? We know that a lot of times when someone is elected or someone runs a nonprofit or a business, do you go and try to make your printer get involved in the community, or do you say, you're printing and that's valuable to me and I'm going to pay you for it? So I'm not asking you to go out and create a new nonprofit, to get on a nonprofit board. I'm not saying that you should make some kind of a new group out of here. I'm not trying to lead you with any of those thoughts, But I think Joe and I are almost like stuck. You know, we can see that if we get another council person or two that loves Mare Island, understands Mare Island, especially District 4, they're going to represent Mare Island. But more, and as importantly, understands the community, understands this loss, this disappointment, and not being able to take, you know, I had a man call and he said, do you still have those yurts? My wife and I, no, my girlfriend and I stayed at one. We now have 4 kids, twins, and I want to surprise her and propose to her and have a camping proposal, you know. No, you can't do that. Not here. Maybe you could go to Napa, or maybe you can go to East Bay Parks, or maybe Lake Solano, but I'm very sorry. We had it for 4 years, but not now. So we know that people are mourning. They're confused. You're here. But I think you're here because you have some good ideas. So let's hear. There's a hand. There's a hand.
I got Daniel. Daniel.
Thanks, Myrna and Joe, for the and everyone who has spoken so far. Myrna, the most intriguing thing about strategy that caught my attention from your opening remarks was when you mentioned that the state of California actually owns the preserve.
Yes.
Well, the city has not shown a lot of interest in Mare Island up until now, and the developer so far has not shown interest in Mare Island. So, as we're talking about strategy, I'm just wondering what cards could be played to get the state of California involved. That seems like another power structure that is not involved at all. But to make things happen on Mare Island, you do have to, right now there's 2 main stakeholders, the developer, the city. Neither has a particular interest in Mare Island so far. Now, as you mentioned, we will have a representative representing Mare Island and some of the area across the water after the next election. I would hope that everyone in this room and everyone who cares about Mare Island would be looking for whoever that candidate is who is going to be elected to represent Mare Island. We need a champion. Mare Island needs a champion. Someone who is going to show up at every council meeting with Mare Island in mind and is going to, whatever the strategies are that get hatched here and grow out of here, that representative on the city council needs to champion those ideas and ask the questions that have been asked here today. Where is the rugby club? Why were they pushed off? Why have the changes been made to the preserve? Why are there no longer any events like we used to have, a Halloween event where you got to go and learn about bats? You know, a well-funded flyway festival. And I've learned a lot about Mare Island history. I mean, still scratching the surface, but one part of it that I have learned about is when the transition was made from the Navy to the city was scared to death about taking on any financial liability for Mare Island. The former mayor in Totoli has actually spoken on the record and said our goal when we took over Mare Island from the Navy was to not have Mare Island cost the city 1 cent, which is the reason why we have the CFDs on Mare Island. But what that also means, and I'll wrap up because I know other people want to talk, what it basically means is, as Myrna and others have said, the city is scared to death of liability on Mare Island. So they use the safety excuse. We got to close the museum. It's a fire trap. We got to close down the preserve, keep people off of it. The city is afraid of liability, so that's one part. And then the city doesn't want to spend any money, not a nickel, to support Mare Island. So those are the two forces that are working against Mare Island. So the strategy that we come up with, let's make sure that we elect someone who is going to show up and champion our ideas.
Good.
Thank you, Mr.
So, Myrna, you said somebody over here
Right here, okay. Had her hand up. Do you remember?
I had a question earlier. That March 20 was, of course, the time when COVID closures happened. Were any of these closed and the excuse of COVID was given?
That's what I mentioned earlier.
No, that was real interesting. Nothing was closed. It was either closed just before COVID, and it was all independent of COVID.
Thank you. I have a second question. Mona, you always claimed that the long-term goal of the preserve was for it to become a regional park. I believe that we should now move in that direction. The land was given by the State Commission to the city, as you point out. We should do that now and work at county and state level consistently. We show this is our plan, this is our timeline.
Well, there are a couple issues with that. First place, the county has shown little interest in parks, period. The Sierra Club has been involved for over a decade in trying to get a regional park district. And we've been unsuccessful, and always something else seems to be more important. There's no funding for it, et cetera, et cetera. So to get county support for a park in Vallejo is highly problematical. The second thing is the State Land Commission is not an operator of open space. They are not an enforcement agency. We are discussing things and discussing our options with the State Land Commission, and when I say we, the Sierra Club and the Mare Island Heritage Trust, we are discussing things with them, but it's a complicated nut. And that's why, that's part of this reason, because anybody who has any insight on how we can get some leverage with the city, we're more than, that's all right. And thanks, Paula, for coming.
Thank you, Paula. And for your service, 28 years. Manny, I see your name tag. I don't know you, but come along. Come over here near the mic.
Right here. I don't want to be on camera.
Oh.
I just want to just say something. Like,
Yeah. You better speak loud.
I work in Mare Island.
Yeah.
You know, I work in Factory OS.
Yeah.
You know what? That's what Mare Island means. You know, so he just started that business there. You know, and it's really doing great. They lost $5 million. Those project that they did because the plumbers didn't do the roofers didn't do the roof right, and it destroyed it. But it's still going strong. You know what? And I talked to a woman who wants to renovate a building to start something on Mare Island. You know, and another guy that's been working at Mare Island for a long time. He says he wants to start a business at Mare Island, making like games and all that. I forgot the hobby that he was talking about. Where kids can go there and shop, And anyways, that sounds exciting. Because Mare Island, I love it there. I love going there and go. Nice. But you know what? There's so much that can be done there. People can start little small businesses or whatever. And she wants me to go in with her. Part of that venture. But I don't know. But I told her that I'm going to invite her over here.
Well, there you go. Thank you. And I do want to be clear that we're not here today to try to, in any way, discourage business. on Mare Island or within this entire community. What we're here is we understand that businesses locate here based on a quality of life. People purchase their homes here and stay here based on a quality of life. And the people who invested in Mare Island or in throughout the rest of the town, whether you did it as a business or as a resident, you had expectations when you bought that, or when you founded your business, that have deteriorated. And they have nothing to do with COVID as far as we could tell. And so we couldn't qualify for COVID funding. And so you bring up a great idea, and I hope that this community can be super supportive of businesses who want to get started too, and incubating and that kind of thing. And I think that I want us to go back in these next few minutes also to what is it that we can do to ensure a ever improving quality of life and amenities that make the island, that fill in for where the developer can't and where the city can't, and then build the case with those other agencies and other entities where money is flowing from. The governor has about $1 billion on the table right now. 30 by 30. Mare Island was put on that list. 30% of California's open space natural lands protected by the year 2030. Think about that we're almost through 2022 or halfway through. So just in 7 years' time, and Mare Island was placed on that list. That is a huge amount of money that's out there floating around, but we have to have an expertise, and as Kathleen said, we have to prove that we're worthy of those kinds of investments at the state level. And then the other source of funding is the State Coastal Conservancy, $500 million. If we couldn't get any of the grants from Prop 68 through GVRD, what's the chances that we're going to get any money for Mare Island if we haven't sat down and honed a message and demonstrated commitment and put some great proposals together? So how do you put proposals together? And most of these funds give you extra bonus points, or they require that the application come from the landowner at a minimum, and preferably from the agency and from a nonprofit. So if you obliterate all your nonprofits and all of your resources there, then what as an agency do you have to go apply for? Maybe some CAL FIRE grants to cut down a few more trees, but in the end, you need that richness that comes from the entire community participating. Now,
Quick question. Are there international...
no questions. We got statements
quick
like...
strategy. Are there a strategy on your part, both of you, to seek international funds if they are legal? Thank you.
I'm just laughing this going.
No, I haven't.
Knowing how crazy.
Laughter helps. Laughter helps. Kiva.org gets funding from all over the world to assist a lot of small businesses. So don't laugh. If it was sarcastic, if it's helpful.
I'm not sarcastic. I'm
Thank
just
you.
telling you as people
Thank you.
stood
My
up.
apologies.
People
Okay,
stood up. and
my view of this is I'm deeply active in the Sierra Club, and I found some pots of money which we've been able to assist. I don't know how long, but we've assisted the Flyaway Festival for the last few years and been the major sponsor. And I will continue to look for those resources. And most of them I'm finding are in the club and tend to be actually even regional. I don't believe these funds are statewide. So, but I do bring up this point consistently, Ravi, with the people I'm working with within the club about the low per capita amount of philanthropic dollars that we get. And that seems to help. Yes, Kathleen.
I just want to apologize about laughing. In
I accept it. Thank you.
2014, you had people who stood up in front of your city council and said they had $95 million of Chinese money. Nobody could find any trace of that. And so this city has wanted to believe pipe dreams, is my experience watching. So, that's not, I wouldn't say that's out there. I think Build Back Better money, I think state money, I think giving money to an entity more sophisticated and deeper pocketed than either the city of Vallejo or any of its nonprofits, which is not dissing either of those. It's saying they play in their lane.
Yeah.
But I have another question when you said strategy. So the man who spoke from Factory OS. So this is the strongest, and I must say a word you guys are going to react to, industrial market that people have had in ages. And I know that we shut down a cement plant, which is, I understand that. However, North Island and much of Maryland is zoned for industry, for job creating, for things like Factory OS, for things like Maryland Dry Dock. There's a perception by the city staff and by the developers that's not what the community wants, because the community didn't want Orsa, right? And your staff has bragged about how they prohibited cement plants on Maryland. That was never allowed under the specific plan. That was always. So the kind of question is, if somebody came in and said they wanted to do an Amazon distribution center like is up in Vallejo, would this community support that? That would build taxes, sales taxes, things like that. I'm not saying the entire rate, and if you've seen what's in Vacaville, it's not, wouldn't be the whole thing. I mean, some of this is not on the preserve. I'm not saying on the preserve. The former Navy industrial areas. Are we waiting for it to be a Googleplex, which is probably the 15-year horizon that the developer's talking about, or would be open to where the market is now? And that would build more revenues and more momentum and might get the benefits of it.
Okay, I'd like to answer that
I'd
a
love
little
to
bit.
hear.
Number one, Ann over there asked about the north, what's called North Mare Island, which is really northeast. And during that hearing, the assistant city manager said, well, if the community demands mixed use on this property, it's currently industrial, but if they demand mixed use, of course, we'll go get it cleaned up to that. And you got to look at it from the developer's perspective. That land, as mixed use, is worth somewhere between 3 and 10 times compared to what it's worth as industrial. So yeah, the developer has a tremendous amount of pressure of any land that they own on the island that's developable to get the maximum value out of that property that they can. And that includes the golf course. And the maximum value of property you can get is residential. That's the highest rate of return you get on land in California. The second highest is this mixed use type stuff. Then comes commercial industrial, and the lowest is agriculture. And so that's why land use is going to be critical, because this developer, we sold them the land, but are we going to approve a change? Are we going to have any input on the zoning of the land? Which we in the Sierra Club think is critical. We have to have a seat at the table as this developer comes up with a new site-specific plan. That is a critical strategy that we have to pursue. And, well, Myrna has some more.
I serve on the 3 chapter, that would be Loma Prieta, Redwood chapter, and the Bay chapter of the Sierra Club's Sea Level Rise Committee. Whatever dreams you might have had about the north end of the island, or maybe the shoreline of the south end of the island, or maybe your waterfront, or maybe the meadows, we have to rethink in these incredibly complex ways how we're going to survive what's called climate change. We know about it, but what does it mean to our community and sea level rise? Most of Mare Island is 3,800 acres of the 5,600 are tidal and non-tidal wetlands. Much of that will be subject to liquefaction, It will be subject to sea level rise, and it won't be suitable for this highest and best use in the marketplace. So I think that, like that 35-person team that the mayor put together, Mr. Tintley, in 2003, who worked for 4 years on a report to council and went out, the city staff went out and got a contractor to help us finalize that. It happened to be the director of the state parks, and he's still a consultant to us, former director. We might be needing to do something as a community that makes sure that our interests and what makes our hearts sing, and it isn't necessarily always what makes a developer's bottom line ring, and it may cause some friction between the political parties that are saying we need the money. I think our system of cities depending on sales tax is a broken system. But we may have to just get super creative with Mare Island and with the downtown and how we glue that all together. And the reason we came here is not for the answers today, but to begin this conversation and to get it out of our system so that you can't say, well, nobody ever does anything. No one ever says anything. But these are hard, difficult decisions. And the reason we talk about the money coming out of the governor's office, that $1 billion, and how we're going to finesse getting some of it and what it's going to take to have successful applications and funds flow, is because we don't have a good track record, but now's the time for us to seize the moment. Maybe a community-based strategy paralleling and involving the specific plan that the developer will be working on. Unheard of. No one can believe it in the whole Bay Area when they hear that the developer is doing their own specific plan. That's not arm's length. So we need to have the assurances, and maybe we craft some language that ensures that we're, as community, people who care, that we're at the table in a special way because of the fact that the developer has been given that job, because they seem to have deeper pockets than us. But they don't have a deeper heart than us. They don't love Mare Island more than us. They haven't invested more in Mare Island than we have. Don't forget that. They have not done the $1 billion worth of cleanup and sitting at those meetings with the U.S. Navy every month on the Restoration Advisory Board. They didn't buy a house and make all the investment that you do with the extra CFD charges. They didn't do all of that. You have the track record way ahead of them, so they need to be brought to the table. And that's one thing our political leaders could help with, is encouraging in every way the community to be sincerely engaged, not just giving a presentation at the Rotary, but a more sincere involvement. We have only about 5 or 6 minutes left. We had a survey, but we don't want to just walk away. We're wondering, is there a need for a series of meetings, just small, sitting around a table together on different topics? I mean, how might you want to change, or do you see any reason to change what we have, what seems to be taking place?
Yes, sir.
Just one last quick comment on what's been said. The $1 billion, or the money that is out there floating around. So we've got what we heard from the presentation. We have the preserve shut down, the museum shut down, various things that you talked about shut down. Perhaps a coalition of all of those nonprofits, the ones that added to the quality of life on Mare Island, could form a coalition of Mare Island nonprofits for Mare Island quality of life. I'm just thinking, if you're going to go try to tap a fund of money, and I don't know how that works, but if I'm holding on to $1 billion and trying to figure out how to spend it, I'm probably going to respond, or an effective presentation, one possible effective presentation is if there is a single proposal from Mare Island, the preserve, the museum, all of the other stakeholders to show, look at all of these things that are going to improve the quality of life on Mare Island if the state of California funds us. It's an organized, collective, nonprofit vision for Mare Island rather than each individual nonprofit going to the governor's. Well, we've got this one on Mare Island from the preserve, and here's another one. And even, I don't know if they're long gone, but the rugby club, maybe all they want is just to ask for, give us enough money to water the grass, and we'll be happy. And the others, the airplane, the model airplane club, the dog people, if they're still around, perhaps reach out to them so that their ask might be very modest, but if you can point to multiple quality of life improvements on Mare Island from a fund of money from the state, the feds, whatever, it might be an effective approach.
I think that's a brilliant idea. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Who hasn't spoken or had a thought? Michael.
Yeah, I just want to just make this, if I can sit down, I can speak, I got big mouth.
No, come,
Well, right.
because we're being recorded.
Oh, I don't really
Bill's
want to.
doing such a good job.
I don't really want to be recorded, but oh well.
Well, do this.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Myrna.
I could use that.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you
yes.
very much.
I know I asked you many years ago
Closer.
if you were never with us, if you passed away,
Yeah.
what's going to happen to the preserve?
Well, now we know.
Right. Well, that's my concern. So,
Nothing.
well, God
Nothing
bless-
good.
No, of course. But God bless for everything you do, Myrna. Just a quick history thing, and I know this because my father was really into local history. When the Benicia Arsenal closed down in 1964, or the Army base in Benicia, Benicia was in big trouble because that was its whole economy was based on the arsenal. For Benicia, fortunately, very quickly, the industrial park took off there, the refinery, but there was a proposal to initially turn the arsenal into like a historical park, and that didn't materialize. But through the efforts of politicians at the time, that was the genesis very quickly for getting the Benicia State Recreation Park developed. So the closure of the Benicia Arsenal essentially within just a few years resulted in the Benicia State Park getting set up. Even though that was on a different piece of property, they were connected.
Yeah.
So the Navy having left Mare Island many years now, I'm speaking specifically from the perspective of the preserve. I think it'd be a great idea long-term if the state park, I'm sure they don't want to take it over bureaucratically, but ideally it would be really a prime piece of property for the state to take over as part of the state park system. I used to work at the Benicia State Park anyway, so I sort of know a little bit how state parks works. But to me, I just see a natural connection there, and I think it's really appropriate either having some sort of governmental agency long-term taking the preserve over, so that we don't have to keep revisiting this issue down the road. If somebody as wonderful as Myrna is not with us anymore, developers, the thing about California history, it's all about real estate. And that's all it is. You could study California history for forever, and basically it boils down to real estate development. So that's essentially what's going to happen to this island, to the preserve. That's prime real estate. Developers want to put houses there. The city almost certainly wants to put homes there because that's where all the money is. Everything's about money. Everything's about real estate. So in order to get the preserve preserved, we need to have either state parks or some sort of either national parks or some sort of organizational body long-term, either if not taking over, at least having some sort of relationship with, say, a community organization. So that's,
Okay. Yeah, good
that's
advice.
where I go.
I know we just have to wrap it up. I would say go back to our report that was prepared by the task force. It was very thorough, 4 years long, and about 100 pages, but we have the 13-page version as well. But it talks all about partnerships and relationships, and again, trust, is going to be number one. You can't accomplish a partnership for a day, and I'll have to tell you this, whether you're a mother or a husband or a business partner or a teacher or whatever, you cannot accomplish anything with anyone if you don't have a basis of trust. And I think that that's what's broken down, and that's where the sadness is right now, and the confusion in the public. And so whatever we can do because, we can plead and pray for national parks, state parks, but we already drove them away. So now we have to come and hold hands and see if there's anything left of that relationship. So, Beverly? Kent, you got to come this far.
What about, there must have been, hundreds of other cities that have been successful in forming a park. What about following one of the models that are similar to ours and doing that?
Look, you guys, we didn't come here to talk about the Mare Island Preserve. We came here to talk about all of the resources on Mare Island that were community-run, community-based. I'm not ridiculing you, but I'm just saying I don't want to just focus on the preserve. I want to focus on these things that absolutely are proven to bring value to a community in the form of community-based. That's why we have nonprofit status. Well, that's why we have nonprofit status for churches. They're thought to bring us value outside of, as part of our civic life. And something happened overnight to blow up everything that had been invested in on Mare Island. And I'm not here to say whether one was better than the other. The State Lands Commission, in its public trust doctrine that comes down from the Roman times and the Magna Carta, makes no judgment on what is of value as a public trust. And I would similarly say that I have no judgment on what's better. There's no ranking in my mind in the community engagement, the community run aspects of the Mare Island Preserve. There's one, the Mare Island, there's one place that hasn't been touched yet. And that's because it has a contractual relationship. And that is the Global Center for Success and the Vallejo People's Garden. It has a contractual relationship with the city of Vallejo that they dare not mess with. So that's a nice thing. We went out to their gathering last weekend. So this is a big topic. We don't expect any of you to make sense of it all, but you have a piece of it because you're here. You have a piece in your heart because you're here. You have a concern or a professional expertise, and that's why you're here. You have an investment in this, whether you live here or not. Mike?
Just maybe having as a strategy, maybe requiring some of the decision makers right there at City Hall, some of the staff, requiring them to be at meetings like this.
There you go.
Right there.
We did have some great meetings with the city manager a few years ago with various key staff. And that was very effective, very effective. I like that.
Which city manager?
City manager does call most of the shots, but my experience having worked for the city, the mid-level people, managers, too, need to be.
Yeah, and this city manager brought in those people, and it was a dream. It was a dream team at one point. Yeah, but how do you assure that consistency is over time, which is what you're concerned about?
Okay, folks, we got to wrap up. We got to let these library people talking about staff. We got to let them get home at a reasonable time tonight.
If you could help us stack chairs, we need to be out of here by 5.
And thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.